nation's capital, the Conservative Caucus presents Conservative Roundtable, an in-depth look at today's most important issues.
Welcome to Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors these broadcasts. Our guest for this broadcast is a man whom I've been privileged to know for decades, Dick Dingman. Dick is a man of great experience. He has held elective office in Vienna, Virginia. He's been a top aide to a member of Congress, and he was executive director for 7 years of a very important Capitol Hill institution, the House Republican Study Committee. He also served with Paul Weyrich as executive vice president of the Free Congress Foundation. He was also executive VP of America's Voice TV. He's been married for 50 years. He's got 4 children and 9 grandchildren. And now he's successfully been working for an organization, helping lead an organization called the Free Speech Coalition. Now, for me, a free speech is when I don't get paid an honorarium. But that's not what you had in mind. What is the Free Speech Coalition?
Now, the Free Speech Coalition is an organization that tries to help stem the tide of excessive government regulation at the federal and the state level of nonprofit organizations. Many of the efforts to regulate nonprofits creep over into stifling free speech. And there are lots of examples of that. But that's the goal of the Free Speech Coalition,
well, give me
to
an
preserve
example.
Free speech.
Give me an example of how free speech is stifled on the part of nonprofits.
Well, all right. First of all, let's look at the various agencies that exert control over nonprofits. You have the Internal Revenue Service that, first of all, decides whether or not you're going to be a tax-exempt organization. And along with that, offering that deduction for taxes and exemption, they have lots of control. You have to spell out what the purpose of your organization is. If they don't think you are carrying out your stated purpose, they can come in and threaten to revoke your tax exemption. We had a case a few years ago where there was a small organization raising money for cancer. They didn't have a direct mail program.
They were actually against cancer.
They were against cancer,
Okay.
That's right. They didn't have a direct mail program, and they were struggling financially. They decided, well, we need a direct mail program. So they didn't have the front money to start a program. So they went to a consultant, and they explained it all. And he said, look, I think you've got a legitimate cause. I think we can raise money. And so he wrote up a contract, but he said, now look, so that I'll put up the front money, but the money has to come into escrow so that I get paid back. Well, the IRS comes along, and they say, we have reviewed your contract, and we don't like it. And we're going to declare that this consultant is an insider, and that creates all kinds of legal problems. And we're going to revoke your tax exemption 4 years retroactively. Now, we took the IRS to court, and we won.
Who is we, the Free Speech Coalition?
The Free Speech Education and Defense Foundation. And so we beat the IRS, the tax court, in that case. But there was an effort to control what they could say.
But money had to be paid to defend yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And there are lots of other ways.
And they have unlimited resources. They can prolong it, and they can raise your legal fees.
That's correct.
Et cetera.
That's correct. Now, an area where we have a lot of efforts to control free speech right now, in the Congress, there are efforts to stifle free speech. When they have, as a result of the lobbying scandals, they've said, well, we're righteous people. We're going to change the ethics program in the Congress, and all you voters, watch us now. Well, part of what they are doing is that they want to stifle grassroots lobbying. When you put up a promo and encourage people to contact members of Congress, if this legislation were to go through, you'd have all kinds of hoops you have to jump through. You'd have to register with the Congress, report how much money you spent doing it, report every cause that you put out a grassroots appeal on. So when they had this come up in the Senate back in January as part of the S1 bill, Senator Bennett of Utah introduced an amendment to delete the section that would limit grassroots lobbying. And, amazingly, we won that battle.
52-48.
Very close, very close. But now we're dealing with the House. And the House is working hard to change the ball game. And there are a lot of things that they're trying to do. They want to peel off the opposition. So they're trying a couple of things. And they've got, for instance, a bill that relates to this is H.R. 804, introduced by Representative Doggett of Texas, along with 49 co-sponsors. And this one is called the Stealth Lobbyist Disclosure Act. It's another case where they're trying to get all kinds of people that have to register with the government and get their blessing. And then of course, there's a bill that was H.R. 984, and that is introduced by our local Congressman Tom Davis and Congressman Waxman, the new chairman of the House Oversight Subcommittee. And this one has a section in there that is going to say that any contact with a government official, this is not lobbying Congress, this is executive branch. If you contact Secretary X, Y, or Z of an agency to express a viewpoint, he has to record that, he has to report that to the Congress, it has to be then put on a database so that the public can look at it. And what that's going to do is, it's going to cause federal officials to say, I don't want to go to a ball game where somebody might want to talk to me and ask me about an issue. I'd have to stop and write it all down. And if I didn't report it, I would be in trouble. Maybe a third party would overhear a conversation that didn't get reported. Then both of these parties are going to have to defend themselves and say, I'm innocent. So it's going to be a real problem. But they don't want any contact to a federal official from a private entity or a lobbying group to go unreported. So it's another effort to stifle. And the original bill, this S1, would have included people running blogs. It would have included all kinds of internet communications, and you know how those go around the world. So it would have covered that. So they're trying to peel that off so that it'll reduce the opposition. They still want to control grassroots lobbying. The fact that the Constitution says we have a right to petition Congress doesn't seem to make any difference to them. They want you to have to report, to register, and have it all be on the public record, which is going to then cause people to say, I don't know that I want, my position might be unpopular. I'm not sure I want it to show up in the public record. It's going to chill free speech, and it's a serious threat.
One of the reasons you've been successful, and were successful in the Senate, is that you've built a coalition that includes nonprofit groups of disparate views, liberal and conservative.
Very.
Talk about that.
The Free Speech Coalition is a broad coalition. The particular coalition that we're working with right now on the grassroots lobbying issue has none other than the ACLU. Now, most of the members in the coalition are on the conservative side, but the ACLU has come right out foursquare and behind the constitutional principles, and we're glad to have them working with us on this issue.
And that's helped you get some liberal votes.
Absolutely, certainly.
Now, one thing on which you didn't touch is the area of federal election law. Now, there was a time when George Washington could run for the Virginia House of Burgesses, and he would sit at one end of the table, his adversary would sit at another, and he would serve roast beef and all kinds of liquid refreshments, and people would walk up and they would show their vote, depositing it either in his bucket or in his adversary's bucket, and he was under no limits of how much beef or pork he could provide or how much liquor he could provide. I mean, it was a free country, even under the rule of Britain. But today there are all kinds of rules. We just have a couple of minutes so we can before the break, so we can just touch on it. But if anything chills free speech, it's the McCain-Feingold law. Absolutely it does. And manifestation of that coming out of the FEC, Federal Election Commission, they have rules that say that you have an advocacy organization. You promote certain principles. But if you were to say 60 days before an election, Congressman X's bill is coming up for a vote, let the Congress know how you feel,
Well, if that Congressman X is a candidate, you can't do that. They won't let you.
Previously, you had to explicitly advocate the election or
That's
defeat
right.
or a candidate to get in trouble if you're a nonprofit.
That's right.
But now,
all you have to do is mention them.
Your freedom has been totally erased.
That's correct.
And that's frankly one of the reasons why John McCain, in my opinion, will not be the Republican nominee, because there are still many Americans who value the First Amendment, which says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or speech, etc.
Right.
And
the right to petition Congress.
And the right to petition. Now, we're going to go into this more after the break.
All right.
One of the things I want to discuss in the next segment is the way in which, under McCain-Feingold, Congress has exempted Indian tribes. So as a result, Indian tribes are not subject to the same restrictions as nonprofit entities. So they have their casinos, they have other things going on, and the Indian tribes are able to spend far more money aiding and opposing candidates than are even political action committees or nonprofits. Right. We have to take a break now. Stay with us, and we'll get back to hear more from one of America's leading experts on tax law, election law, and other elements of the law and regulation which affect the rights of private citizens. We'll be right back. One of the top leaders in the Communist Chinese military declared that the United States is the main enemy of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the People's Republic of China, which is longhand for what we call China. We have been building up our enemy, if that is a reciprocal term, by giving them most favored nation status and membership in the World Trade Organization. Last year alone, that gave them an $84 billion advantage in money which is fungible. And as a result of the extra money they have, they're not only taking jobs from the United States, they're increasing their military budget by 17% a year. It's time to stop sending technology and dollars to Communist China.
The Conservative Caucus, www.conservativeusa.org or 703-938-9626.
Here's how you can become a citizen lobbyist and influence how your representatives vote. Write a letter to your congressmen and senators. Speak out on a call-in talk radio program. Write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper and call the Conservative Caucus for more information at 703-938-9626.
More than the entire population of Cincinnati. More than all the men and women in the Marine Corps. More than 4 times the number of unemployed auto workers. Since 1980, over 500,000 Americans who make clothing and home fashions have lost their jobs because we don't realize the impact of buying imported goods. So if you think looking for the Made in the USA label doesn't matter,
next,
it matters.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, Chairman of the Conservative Caucus, and our special guest is the Honorable Dick Dingman, who is a leader of the Free Speech Coalition. Dick, we had just begun to talk about BCRA, which is the fancy initial for McCain-Feingold.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about that and how it regulates and restricts free speech.
Well, obviously, it controls free speech in that it limits the amount of money that an individual can give. It certainly limits what advocacy organizations can say in the course of their advocacy, because the Federal Election Commission is now construing much of what they say as being election material, and they want to change the identification, the definition of what is a political committee, so that many advocacy organizations then fall over into that category. And that's a whole new realm of registration and controls. So they, through the McCain-Feingold, there are a lot of controls, and it stifles what people can do.
In my view, two things have changed the nature of our national leadership. One was the 17th Amendment, which resulted in U.S. senators being chosen in supposedly popular elections, where big media and big money have a significant influence, whereas previously someone could be chosen by a state legislature to be a U.S. senator on the basis of having earned the approbation and respect of his colleagues in the legislature or elsewhere. And now you have a Senate of millionaires. At least a plurality of the senators have net worths of more than $1 million. And one of the reasons is the federal election law amendments, which place limits on what individuals can contribute unless it's your own money. And so you have someone like John Corzine, now the governor of New Jersey,
who bought the seat,
who was a U.S. senator, who spent $60 million to buy a seat. Not unusual. It happens all the time. And it's very hard for someone who is not himself or herself wealthy, or who does not have the support of big money and big media, to become a U.S. senator. It's become more like the House of Lords than the U.S. Senate.
It absolutely has. And, of course, there are many aspects to the McCain-Feingold. And one of the things, even though the advocacy groups are limited, the people who are not limited are the press. And the press, by and large, are liberal in their orientation.
So let me stop you there
Yes.
and clarify and emphasize what you're saying. In other words, if you own a radio station, a television network, or station, or newspaper, you can do whatever you want to favor or disfavor a candidate for office. I remember growing up in Boston when Barney Frank was running for Congress. The Boston Globe gave him, in effect, $5 million worth of editorial support, news coverage support, etc. There would have been a limit of what they could do, but for the fact that the federal election laws of 1974 provided exceptions for big media. But if you run a personal blog or a little hometown newsletter that you did on Mimeograph, you are restricted in ways that the big media people are not restricted. This is an outrage.
You bet it is. It certainly is, because they don't have to be accurate. They don't have to be fair. They can just say whatever they want to say, and they get away with it. But yet, as you say, if you were running your own personal little newsletter, then you come under all of these controls that make it very difficult.
Well, I'm very glad that you and the Free Speech Coalition are hard at work on this issue. And again, in the interest of full disclosure, let me mention that the Conservative Caucus has joined the Free Speech Coalition, and we are very thankful that the FSC is working hard. And I'm looking at the list of members. You've got the American Association of Christian Schools, the American Center for Law and Justice.
Well, that's the current coalition on the grassroots lobbying issue.
Okay. Concerned Women for America, ACLU, Eagle Forum, Homeschool Legal Defense, National Rifle Association, National Taxpayers Union, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you have put out a broadside talking about what people can do to oppose efforts to regulate grassroots lobbying. For people watching this program, what would you tell them about ways in which they can help you?
Well,
now, we can't mention money. This is a public access station, so we can't ask you for money. Whatever your heart may dictate is up to you, but we can't ask for it.
Well, they can do the kinds of things that an activist can do on almost any issue. That is, they can contact their congressman. They can write letters to the editor. They can get on talk shows. And one thing I need to make clear on this grassroots lobbying issue is that there is a huge exemption built into the bill so that unions, large corporations, large advocacy groups like AERP or Public Citizen, as long as they are activating their members.
And some of them are actually funded by the taxpayer. People don't realize it, but AARP has received hundreds of millions of dollars from the American taxpayer.
Well, under the legislation that has been proposed, both in the Senate and in the House, they are exempt as long as they are going to their stockholders, their members, their board people, or their employees. Now that means that they can spend millions of dollars in grassroots lobbying and not report a dime of it, but yet if you, Howard Phillips, want to do it through your organization, you've got to report every nickel of it. And so there's a huge exemption there. Now I'm not proposing that they all have to report too, because I think it's unconstitutional in the first place. None of them should have to report.
So the answer is not to punish everyone.
That's right.
It's to punish none of us.
Well, the answer is stick to the Constitution, which says we have the right to petition Congress. Now, never before has there been legislation that tried to control if you want to communicate to the general public. Yes, there have been lobbying laws if you want to lobby directly to Congress. There are certain laws that have been on the books for some time. But never before have they tried to control if you want to communicate with the public. That's a whole new ballgame, and that is stifling free speech.
How did you become involved personally in this issue, Dick?
Well, I got involved in this because the second time I retired.
And you were in the military, too?
No, I was only briefly in the military, just 2 years. But I spent 30 years in federal service, and then I spent another 10 years with Paul Weyrich and America's Voice Television. And after I retired from that, I got a call from Bill Olson, who is one of the co-founders of the Free Speech Coalition. And
one of the greatest attorneys in America.
That's right. And Bill asked me if I would work on a part-time basis with the Free Speech Coalition. And since it's an easy commute, just 2 miles from my house, that sounded like a workable deal.
Now, you've got a big responsibility, but you don't have a big staff. How many people are working with the FSC?
You don't want to ask that question, Howard.
You're it.
I'm it. Well, Bill does a lot pro bono.
He's a wonderful man.
He spends a lot of effort. He provides the office space. He provides all the supplies, the phone, everything that is needed.
Bill and I have something in common. We both oversaw the Federal Legal Services Program, and we both knew how rotten and corrupt it was. And Bill did a great job when he was there.
Well, Bill was, of course, not confirmed by the then Democratic Senate when he was nominated to head the Legal Services Corporation. He was not confirmed because he was too conservative.
Well, and of course, Hillary Rodham ran it under Bill Clinton, and it was the basis for Bill Clinton's political organization. 25,000 full-time liberal legal activists operating through 325 local programs, and Bill Clinton's first cabinet included a half a dozen people who were veterans of legal services under Hillary Clinton, Hillary Rodham.
Yeah, it's an incestuous operation.
It is. We have to take a break here. When we come back, we're going to give the last word to Dick Dingman, and he's going to focus on the most important elements of this topic we're now discussing. Please stay with us. The Constitution of the United States is a guarantor of our liberties if it is followed. Unfortunately, too many of our elected officials neither read the Constitution nor adhere to its provisions. The Conservative Caucus has as its mission limiting the federal government to its delegated, enumerated functions. We strive to reassert the principles of sovereignty and accountability set forth in the Declaration of Independence and confirmed in the United States Constitution. The Conservative Caucus deserves your support as the only national conservative organization for which constitutional fidelity is a prime issue and motivating force.
The Conservative Caucus, www.conservativeusa.org or 703-938-9626.
Here's how you can become a citizen lobbyist and influence how your representatives vote. Write a letter to your congressmen and senators. Speak out on a call-in talk radio program. Write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper and call the Conservative Caucus for more information at 703-938-9626.
More than the entire population of Cincinnati. More than all the men and women in the Marine Corps. More than 4 times the number of unemployed auto workers. Since 1980, over 500,000 Americans who make clothing and home fashions have lost their jobs because we don't realize the impact of buying imported goods. So if you think looking for the Made in the USA label doesn't matter,
next,
it matters.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus. If you're interested in the kinds of issues and topics we discuss on Conservative Roundtable, I hope you'll check out our website, www.conservativeusa.org. And if you have a question or something you want to share with us, fax us at 703-281-4108. Personal attention of Art Harmon, or you can use snail mail, and our address is 450 Maple Avenue East, Vienna, Virginia, 22180. Dick, how do people get in touch with the Free Speech Coalition?
Well, they can either do it on our website, which is freespeech.org, and I have to emphasize the .org, because if you get the wrong suffix, you're going to get an entirely different organization and you won't like it. So they can go on the web and get us there. Our phone number is 703-356-6912, and so they can get us by phone. But Howie, as we head into the legislative process here in March, and March is likely to be the month when there is action in the House on this effort to control grassroots lobbying, people need to be in touch with their congressman and say, I want no controls on grassroots lobbying, period. Because the other side will just confuse the issue, and they're trying to say now it's only for paid lobbying groups.
And they're saying it's to fight corruption.
It's to fight corruption, but corruption has not been coming from the people communicating to their members of Congress, or groups like yours communicating to the people. That's not where there's been corruption. So people need to make a very clear message. Call your congressman and say, do not include any regulation of grassroots lobbying. Now, if this kind of regulation goes through, I won't be allowed to sit here and say that unless I fill out all kinds of reports and submit it to the Congress. And that is nonsense. That's not constitutional.
Dick, we're out of time, but I hope you're not out of time and we'll be able to keep this up.
Thank you, Howie.
Thank you for joining us on Conservative Roundtable, and please help this good man, Dick Dingman.